If you're a follower of the channel, you know how much I gush about the Iron Man mode and how I play that as my main account. But before I made an Iron Man, I had a main. I was doing some Zulrah and I realized that all my money that I could possibly need I can get from Zulrah, and then I can buy everything else. I burnt out doing this, okay? And that's how I got into my Iron Man. But the collection log did not exist then, and the collection log has been through so many changes that I am saying right now that the collection log has saved Mainscape. Playing a main is almost just as rewarding as playing an Iron Man because of so many changes. We're going to go into all the changes, the recent changes of course, but go through a little bit of a historical timeline. How did we get to this point where the collection log has become such an integral part of the game experience? Let's start off with the most recent change, because this is honestly a big one for collection logging, or clogging as we call it in the biz. Now, we have the collection overview screen. This is an amazing screen with so much good information. Firstly, you got your different categories at the top. Really cool. Generally, you're not gonna pay too much attention to this. If you can green log any of these, especially like clues and raids, that's gonna be nuts to see people do in the future, definitely. But we'll see if anyone really ever does that. One of the features I absolutely love is at the very bottom here, we got our last collected items. This is really cool, especially later in an account where you're getting log slots kind of far and few in between. Being able to see your progress, being able to click on it, by the way, and seeing that. The other thing that's really cool about the last log selected is if you have like a really good week or day or whatever the case is, you can just share a screenshot of this overview and show people like, look at these items I've got recently. Like, I'm going on an absolute tear. Previously, you could only do this by like putting all your screenshots together, showing all the different drops, and I don't know, it's gonna be nice. There's definitely gonna be a lot of Twitter and Reddit posts of people who, you know, their last slots have like these crazy mega rares from multiple raids and stuff like that. That's gonna be really cool to see. Just staring at the screen too, what's really cool about this interface in general, which is kind of like something they need to do to all interfaces, is you can drag this around your screen, you can click on it, and it doesn't cancel or stop your actions in game. So that's just like really nice. All menus need to be able to do this, and I'm sure they're going to work towards that in the future because it's just an awesome quality of life. So other than the bottom that we have here in the top, in the middle here we got the juicy bit. This adds some serious flexing to collection logging. You can now get tiers based on how many log slots you have, and that awards you with a staff that you can carry around and flex. You can also grab a book from that staff and use an offhand instead, or use both, whatever you want. And honestly, having like a gilded staff is going to be such a big flex. That requires 90% of the log to be completely filled, which is crazy. Even Dragon is going to be hard. Over time, every rank except for Gilded will get easier because all the other ones are static and there's always going to be new easy ones to get. Gilded is always 90%, so you're always going to have to kind of re-obtain it whenever there's like new content. Now, this here, honestly, huge in terms of flex items, and there's so many flex items in the game that people really strive towards. This is going to be another one, and in the end of the video we're going to kind of rank this to see where it fits in for, you know, flex items overall. Now, the last thing we have added, which is also kind of a flex in and of itself, is the collection log high score. This is something people have been asking for a very, very long time. Previously, we didn't really know kind of where people ranked. There was a website, collectionlog.net. This is a community website. You had to opt into it, share your information, and that was kind of where the top loggers were, right? Even with these high scores, there's no like kind of new surprises. There are a few people that weren't on collectionlog.net, but now this makes it mainstream, right? This makes it so when you search somebody up, you're gonna see and you're gonna, oh my gosh, they got 1,300 log slots. Like, they're a complete gamer. I can't believe they did this content to get all these slots. So this is absolutely massive. Honestly, these updates were huge today. But we need to go back in time because it hasn't always been like this, right? And it wasn't always part of the culture like it is now. Going back to December 2018, we have the launch of the first iteration of the collection log. Generally speaking, the log itself looked very similar to how it does today. A lot of the quality of life didn't exist, and the biggest thing that didn't exist at this point in time is, you know, an easy way to see the log. You had to go to the collector in the Varrock Museum and get the collection log book. You can access the book from your POH at that point, but the point is you always need to have this book. So you kept one in your bank, you'd open it up and you'd look at your log that way. But this was the introduction. A lot of people definitely got into it, but I would say it was a pretty niche thing to do, especially since none of it was backlogged with anything you previously collected. So, you know, a lot of people who already had established accounts and whatnot weren't very interested in this. And yeah, generally it was a bit of a niche activity you kind of do on the side. So now the collection log exists. A couple years pass and there aren't really much updates to it, but then we start to approach one of the largest quality of life updates, in my opinion, to the collection log. Something that got me into it probably more than any other update, other than maybe the recent update, which is just an incredible update overall. And you wouldn't believe where this revolutionary change comes from. It comes from the Trailblazer League, right? How is it that the Trailblazer League, a seasonal game mode, could impact a main game feature that is about collecting items in the main game? Well, let me tell you, when Trailblazer League launched, we got introduced to one of the best dopamine-filled experiences you will ever experience in this game. This beautiful rectangle, okay? This rectangle here, when you completed a task in Trailblazer, would pop up, and the amount of dopamine you would get every single time, it didn't matter what the task was, it felt so good. Once Trailblazer League concluded, this was sorely missed, but it wouldn't be gone for long, okay? Because just a few months later, we had this introduced in the collection log improvements. So now, when you got a collection log, it would pop up in this beautiful rectangle, and man, this changed so much. There is not a single time, other than maybe when I got my Elder Maul or my Twisted Bow, when I see this box, that I don't absolutely love seeing it. And this also got a lot of other people into collection logging, especially newer players, right? Like, who don't know about the collection log. All of a sudden they start seeing these pop-ups show up, right? Especially when they get key items. Oh, what's this? Oh, what's this? You start to condition yourself to like seeing that square. When you get your Defender the first time and it pops up, when you get Dragon Boots for the first time and it pops up, all those experiences, it's starting to build that in our heads that collecting items feels good. And honestly, this was such a massive change. It wasn't the only change though on that day. There's this term that we throw around a lot when it comes to collection logging. We call it greenlogging. Greenlogging occurs when you get every single log slot in a given activity. This was introduced officially in April 2021. Before this, it was a popular plugin. It actually was a plugin that rose to fame pretty quickly because people just love seeing it. A lot of people started to install it, and very quickly later, Jagex decided to add this as a main feature. So now, that term you hear all the time, greenlogging, it honestly didn't exist prior to this, and this changed people's influence of greenlogging content, where before they might not have obviously considered that. Moving along our timeline, it would only be a couple months later when the collection log got one of its biggest updates ever. Now, the update itself wasn't big, but the impact of the update was definitely big. And again, it comes from a very unlikely source. In July of 2021, we got introduced to one of the largest game systems in old school RuneScape, the combat achievements. Now, obviously, combat achievements are a completely different system. What does it have to do with collection logging exactly? Well, old school was running into a little bit of a problem when it came to different interfaces to include in that little box that we got on the right of our screen. How many menus could we possibly introduce here? It's getting confusing to go through all the different tabs to remember where everything is. Even as a veteran player, sometimes I get lost. Now, Combat Achievements did something amazing. It added this great overview screen where you can see your combat achievements, you could see your total level, you could see how many quests you have completed, but it also added the collection log. Now, all these things you could obviously see here, but what makes the collection log one huge is previous to this, you had to use that stupid book. That book that you needed to grab from your bank, grab from your POH, look at, or use your little achievement gallery and look at it. It was very tedious. By the way, tedious collection logger, hilarious. But this update made it so that you can check your collection log at any point. This was massive. I constantly look at my collection log, and I can imagine that so many players just seeing that number down there of how many logs they got into collection logging because of this change. This cannot be understated. This is one of the major changes that definitely made collection logging way more mainstream. Those are all the updates that we've seen for the collection log, including the recent update, but I want to go back to the beginning of the video when I mentioned how this saves Mainscape. Before the collection log existed, you can argue that obviously an Iron Man earning their own items, etc. is going to be a more rewarding or respected kind of approach, right? When we got the introduction of the collection log, all of a sudden mains could see, hey, I got this item myself, right? There's some validation there, definitely. But it wouldn't be until a couple years passed when collection logging starts to become more mainstream. And it's because of these updates. This rectangle box pop-up that we got, the green logging we got, The fact that it now exists in a very prominent menu where you can see your ranks. Now we got Hiscores, we got a flex item we can wear. There's so many more reasons to collect as a main activity in the game. And honestly, doing it on a main is very similar to doing it on an Iron Man. Obviously, Iron Man, there's going to be more difficulty getting to the content, getting your supplies, clues in particular, right? Because you can't use implings the same way a main can, where you can just buy them. There are definitely differences, but I will say that my opinion between a main and an Iron Man has definitely narrowed over time. I can definitely see respect in a main who has a really, really awesome log. I know they've gone out and they've done a lot of content, and that's really cool to see. Honestly, if I were to make a new account today, would I make an Iron Man versus a main? I don't know exactly. Like, I think it's pretty much up in the air, but I actually love that. I love that there isn't a wrong choice to make here. It's based on what you want to do, and generally speaking, if collection logging is a big part of the game, you're going to be doing diverse content anyways. So the collection log has been updated a ton of times. It's now a main part of the game, and we have a new flex item to go along with it. And I want to compare this flex item to the other flex items in the game and see how big of a flex it is. So let's think about the collection log staff. We're going to use the Gilded Staff, for example. Obviously the other ones, there's still some flex there, but let's use the big one in this case. I want to compare it to the trophies in leagues. You got the Dragon Cup trophy. I personally flex my bronze trophy, but we'll use the Dragon Cup trophy in this case. Then we got the original flex in old school. We got the Infernal Cape. That's a really big one for the first capes, you know, that feels probably better than anything in the game. We got the Quiver as well. Then we got some of the more advanced flexes. We got the Fang Kit, which is a really big deal. We got Blood Torva for taking out the Awaken DT2 bosses. And we got the Zuck Helm, which we get for completing all the combat achievements. If I had to put the Gilded Staff anywhere, honestly, I might put it up with the Zuck Helm. I think it's that big of a flex. 90% of the log completed is a really big achievement that requires a ton of time and requires you to do a bunch of content like raids and stuff anyways. I think it's definitely going to be a bigger flex than having stuff like a Fang Kit or even Blood Torva. But I guess that's up for debate depending on how much you could struggle with stuff like Leviathan. So I guess that's going to vary from person to person. So I want to hear your thoughts on where you think this new item ranks. I would definitely say even like the Dragon Staff or even the Rune Staff, you could slot somewhere in the middle there, but let me know your thoughts. I hope you like this video. I hope you understand why I think collection logging is amazing and why it has completely changed the game for mains.